Dr. Bob Gill has come on again to talk about the NHS. Today, we've just had this announcement. Ministers set out plan to train and keep more NHS staff. I'm just going to play a clip of Rishi Sunak.
Unless we act now for the long term, the challenges we face will only get worse. So today, we're announcing the most ambitious transformation in the way that we staff the NHS in its history, the long-term workforce plan. This is a 15-year plan to deliver the biggest ever expansion in the number of doctors and nurses that we train, and a plan to reform the NHS so we deliver better care in a changing world, and a plan that not only eases the pressures today, but protects this precious national institution for the long term. This is the NHS's own plan, and the government is proud to back it, funding the expansion of education and training for the first 5 years in full, with over £2.4 billion of additional investment. You can trust this government with the NHS. The plan rests on 3 principles: train, retain, and reform.
There you go, Bob. I mean, the government's 15-year plan, it says it was the NHS's own plan. What does that mean?
Hi, Crispin. Yeah, the NHS was cut free of government control back in 2012 with the Health and Social Care Act, where it was repurposed into the NHS England became a privatization board. Many of the board members had come out of the private sector, the think tanks such as McKinsey, the accountancy firms. So behind that NHS logo, you have corporate interests running the show. And, you know, in law, the duty of the Secretary of State was repealed, duty to provide healthcare, and was replaced with the duty to promote. So now they can make out as if that these are public-spirited bureaucrats who believe in the principles of the NHS. But actually, the principles of the NHS have been shredded a long time ago. The NHS we have now bears no relation to the NHS that was set up in 1948, which was the fundamental principle of which was to provide universal, comprehensive care, and that service would be provided by publicly employed and publicly accountable professionals. That's not what we have anymore. We have a fragmented, outsourced, privatized, dysfunctional NHS that this government has deliberately defunded over a decade in order for them to create a workforce crisis for which they had a predetermined solution, this workforce plan. And this plan is not Rishi Sunak's initiative. These plans were drawn up years ago. In fact, there is a continuum of policy, irrespective of which party's in power. And the people driving the plans aren't the politicians. The people driving the plans are the management consultants like McKinsey, the City of London, for the benefit, most perversely, of overseas private corporations.
Well, I mean, the Labour Party, I mean, Wes Streeting has said that the Conservatives have stolen their policy on this. What do you think that says about the Labour Party's policy?
Well, they may both claim ownership of the policy, but the policy is the same. We don't have true opposition. We have two parties pretending to be democratic, but actually following a corporate agenda. So, you know, it doesn't matter whether it's a blue rosette or a red rosette, the destination is the same. And the workforce plan, what it is attempting to do, now that we've seen a hemorrhaging of experienced staff with organizational memory, what they want to do is create a substandard, less qualified workforce, which will be cheaper to employ, easier to control, and actually bind them to the NHS, either through student debt or creating a sub-doctor class of these physicians associates or apprenticeship doctors, perhaps whose qualifications will not be recognized abroad and who will be trapped serving a dysfunctional NHS, which only resembles the NHS in its logo. No principles remain.
Now, you sent me a couple of screenshots to show about what's going on, and I'm just going to put them on the screen. This is a 2012 article, How to Abolish the NHS by Richard Wellings. And within that article, there is this number of bullets. The first bullet says, perhaps most importantly, the compulsory licensing of medical professionals should be abolished. Anyone should be at liberty to practice as a doctor or nurse. Can you explain why that's pivotal towards abolishing the NHS effectively?
Well, yeah, so the logo and the funding stream remains, but how do you extract profit out of healthcare? You do that by having the cheapest, least qualified staff who are easy to replace. And you organize the structure of medicine, not in a way that is good for the patient or good for the professional. It's what's called McDonaldization, where you break the job up into small compartments and you can train people to do a small aspect of the job, but nobody has an overview of the whole system. So you will have, passing encounters with different professionals, none of who get to know the whole picture about the patient's story or symptoms or conditions, none of who will have the opportunity to learn through experience. So you have a conveyor belt along which different professionals will do their little bit for the patient, and you end up hopefully with the patient still alive at the end of it. This is not about delivering safe care. It is not about having satisfied, well remunerated, and professionals who can be proud of the job they deliver. This is about extracting profit at every opportunity and delivering care in the cheapest way possible by having a new type of workforce which is easy to replace and cheap to employ.
Wow. So so there's no difference between the two main parties on this strategy, and what is it that what can be done? I mean, I suppose the RCN strike and the BMA strike are key to stopping this kind of thing going through.
Well, yeah. So, what the most disappointing thing about the strike action is these unions are not making the wider point. They are not painting the picture of the context within which they have suffered a decade of wage suppression. It doesn't make any sense to me why they keep quiet about the policy direction, because the overwhelming majority of the public do not favor a transition to an American-style system, do not favor having to pay twice for healthcare through taxation and through top-up insurance or out of your pocket. So, this should be a winner in terms of a strategy for the unions to use to inform the public what's going on. The collapse of the RCN's industrial action is down to the poor leadership. The leadership's tactics sapped morale, hence you didn't have an adequate turnout. But the turnout that did vote, 80% plus voted for strike action. So the staff are not happy. And I believe they've been badly served by their union leaderships. But, just bringing together the ideology that has ruled policy decision-making for the last 40 years in this country and most of the developed country coming out of America, coming out of the UK, is neoliberalism. And what that is about is turning the public purse into a cash cow for private profit. And in order to do that to the best of your ability, you have to deregulate. So deregulate the professions, allow everybody to become a doctor or a nurse, as you've just read out, and remove protection. So have a fig leaf of regulation, have a fig leaf of patient safety, but in reality, you crush whistleblowers, you have a regulator in bed with the providers. Often the heads of these organizations used to work for the other, the organization that they're supposed to regulate. And we see this time and time again. We see this in the energy companies. We see this in water, that you have toothless regulators who are there to just provide a smokescreen of some independent oversight. But the bottom line will be, we will be having to pay more for healthcare. The outcomes will be worse. There will be no democratic oversight, and we will be hoodwinked and conned that there's some sort of political hope with a Labour government or a change in government, because they are all singing to the same hymn tune.